Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we are talking about my year of Sharon Shinn. 2025, I read 11 books by Sharon Shinn. I started and finished 2 full series from her. Before 2025, I had read one standalone from Sharon Shinn, which was Summers at Castle Auburn. And so this has really been the year where I dove back into her work. At the beginning of the year, I did a Do I Like Sharon Shinn vlog where I read the first book in 2 of her series. And the answer ended up being, yes, I do like her books. So I continued on with both of those series. At this point, I think that I have kind of read everything that I am interested in from her. She does have a couple of other series, but they just don't really sound like something I want to read. So I thought this would be a good time to reflect back on my experience with reading Sharon Shinn. I don't think I'm going to be doing a series review, so this is kind of going to be my stand-in for that. I am going to talk a little bit about Sharon Shinn overall, and a little bit about what each of the series is about, and then get into the tier ranking. So if you want to just skip straight to the tier ranking, I will put a timestamp in the description. But I really wanted to do the tier ranking and rank like each individual book because my experience with her books have been so varied. Overall, I have really enjoyed reading her books, but there have been some real ups and downs in these series, and so I really wanted a way to talk about the individual books within the series instead of kind of talking about the series as a whole for a review. So that's kind of why I landed on this format. So we'll see how it goes. But let's start with kind of talking about Sharon Shinn as a whole. Sharon Shinn primarily writes fantasy. I would characterize her books probably as fantasy romance because the romances are really the center of her stories and her plots. I do think that her stories, like, she does some interesting world building and some really likable characters, but like the romances are kind of the center of each story. And the series that I read do definitely follow a common structure within romance, which is where you have like a group of people and each book follows the romance of one of those people in that group, or you do like, you know, one book is about one person's romance and then the next book is about the romance of a character that you met in the previous book, you know, so they're all connected and everybody ends up with somebody by the end. And that's essentially how her series, or at least these 2 series, are constructed. I think that her romance writing at its best is when she does a subtle romance. Very often the romances that didn't work as well for me were ones where the romance was more overt and more prominent and central from the very beginning, whereas the romances that I think she just did fantastically and I had such a good time were the more subtle, slow burn romances where it's really just like a whisper of a romance, where for a lot of the book you're like, is this even happening? Until the very end, and I loved that, and I think that that is really where she shines. As I said, she has really likable characters. Both of these series have some element of found family. I think that she writes some really great friendships between characters and does the dynamics between characters in a group really well, so that you like each of those characters. They each have their own unique relationship to the other characters in the group. And also, alongside the characters and the romances and the friendships and all of that, there is also some really interesting world building that I really enjoyed. And there are some interesting plots as well. You know, they kind of take a back seat to the romances and the relationships, but I don't mind that. I had a really fun time with this. I also think her writing is just so readable. There is something about her writing, like, it's not overly plain, it's not overly flowery, but there's something about it that is so easy and readable, and it's so easy to just like fall into her books and just eat them up, and that just made it so much fun. So for the books that I'm going to be talking about today, first is the standalone that is Summers at Castle Auburn. I read this maybe 3 years ago, so my memory of it is a little bit hazy because it's been a while. But in it, we are following a girl who is the illegitimate child of a nobleman who has passed away, and he wants her to know his side of the family. And so she has grown up going to Castle Auburn every summer to spend time with that side of her family. And so we are following her throughout her teen years, through significant summers when she was at Castle Auburn, when she is, you know, learning more about the world, coming into her own, finding love, making connections with other characters. I remember feeling like this book didn't have as clear a central plot, so much as just following this character through her kind of coming of age journey. Then one of the series I read this year was the Elemental Blessing series. This is set in a world where their kind of world philosophy, it's not exactly a religion, but their kind of world philosophy surrounds the 5 elements. So in this, there is earth, water, fire, air, and wood are the 5 elements, and these kind of create balance. Everyone has these elements within them, but then there is a certain element that each person is sort of drawn to or defines their personality, and each of these elements has certain personality characteristics or qualities or blessings that are associated with them, hence the name Elemental Blessings. And that becomes a really important element of the world building that I really enjoyed. I liked this idea of this kind of philosophy around balance and blessings, and they have random blessings. It's a really interesting aspect about the different ways that it's integrated into their culture and how they feel it influences their personalities, how it is predictive of futures and things like that. I haven't really explained the plot to this though. The first book starts out following Zoe. She has grown up in a remote village for most of her life, although her father used to be an advisor to the king, but then there was a falling out, and they have kind of been living in this like semi-exile for a long time. At the beginning of the book, her father has recently passed away, and right after his funeral, a man from the capital shows up and tells her that she has to come and marry the king. And she's kind of in this like fugue state where she doesn't quite know what to do, and so she goes with him, but then when they reach the capital, she kind of just disappears into the city and starts a new life. And then from there, we are following her as she is grieving, as she is figuring out what her life is going to be and who she's going to be, and as she is just starting this new chapter of her life. So that's the first book, and as I said, each book in this series follows a different character. However, something about the Elemental Blessings series that did impact my overall like feelings and enjoyment of the series is how it treated characters from other countries and other cultures. I don't think I explained myself very well here, so I'm just going to voice over this part. But in this world, the country that our characters live in is called Wels, or at least that's how I've been pronouncing it in my head. And they do travel at one point to another country. They do get emissaries and royalty from other countries visiting them. And there are times where it felt like pretty much every other country they encountered, with maybe like one exception, was always framed very negatively. Like they were always framed as being backwards or violent or just barbaric or bad in some way. More so than just like, oh, it's, you know, a culture clash and they don't really, you know, understand each other because they just do things differently, which felt very weird and kind of as an overall tone and feeling towards like every other country that they encountered. The other series that I read was the 12 Houses series. So the 12 Houses series takes place in a fantasy country called Gilangaria, I think, where We are following in this first book a band of kind of unlikely companions who have been sent by the king to scope out what's going on in some of the other like southern regions of this country. So this country functions on having 12 noble houses, and there is one central king, and the king suspects that there is unrest among some of these southern houses and that they may be planning rebellion. Alongside that, there's also this rise in the prominence of a fanatical religious cult that persecutes mystics, which mystics are essentially just anybody who uses magic in this world. And so they are like hunting down mystics. And the king has asked this group of people to go to the southern regions to find out more about kind of, is there unrest? How are the noble houses feeling? What's going on with this religious cult? Kind of just feel out like, is there rebellion coming? And so the characters that we're following are two mystics and two of the king's riders. And the king's riders are essentially this elite group of warriors, of guards who are completely loyal to the king. And the two king's riders that we are following happen to not be too fond of mystics, so there is already some tension among these characters. Did I say two mystics? There are actually three mystics in the group that are traveling. But we are following this group as they are kind of gathering intel about what is going on, and this becomes the group of characters that each book is about the romance for one of the characters in this group. They also collect some other members of the group along the way, and this is one that I think particularly has really strong friendships and found family in it. And then I also just wanted to touch on kind of a starting place of where to start with Sharon Shinn from my somewhat limited experience. Obviously, I've only read 2 series and a standalone from her, and really I think that you could start with any of these. It really just depends on what you want. If you want a standalone to kind of see what her books are like, Summers at Castle Auburn was very fun, kind of coming of age story. Elemental Blessings and 12 Houses are much more, I think, romance forward. Elemental Blessings has more of the kind of like philosophical, magical world building to it, and is more centered around a royal family, which is fun. And then the 12 Houses series has more maybe political intrigue with the kind of unrest of the southern houses and this fanatical religious cult. I think that the 12 Houses has a little bit more of a classic fantasy setting. So if that's what you want, you could go with that. I think any of these are a good place to start. So the first book of Elemental Blessings is Troubled Waters, if you want to start there. First book of 12 Houses is Mystic and Rider, if you wanted to start there. So that doesn't necessarily help in terms of like telling you exactly where to start, but I really think that all of these are very readable, very accessible. They're all fun. They have really likable characters. So it really just depends on what you want to read. All right, so let's get started with actually tier ranking these books. We're going to start with the Elemental Blessings series. So first book in the Elemental Blessings series is Troubled Waters. This one is one of the ones that I read for my Do I Like Sharon Shinn vlog, and it was a resounding yes. I had so much fun reading this one. I really like Zoe as a main character. You know, she is going through a lot. She's grieving in this book, but she also is really resourceful. She has a very like forceful personality in a way that I really enjoyed. And this one had one of those very like whisper of a romance type romances that I think is really Sharon Shinn's highlight, where there's so much of the book where you're like, what is going on with these two? Like, I feel like there is tension, but nobody's doing anything. And I adored it. And so I think that this one is going to go in the A tier because this was one of my favorites. I gave this one 5 stars. It was so much fun. Next is Royal Heirs, the second book in the Elemental Blessing series. This one I did not like as much. This is one where I feel like the romance was much more prominent and like obvious from the beginning. They were very clearly like liking each other. It wasn't like subtle the way the first one was. I also didn't really like the love interest in this one. Honestly, I didn't like either of the main characters in this one that much. They weren't terrible. I just was like about them because the love interest, I guess it might be too spoilery. There are just like certain choices that he made that felt very immature to me, and he's supposed to be, I think he's supposed to be like late 20s to 30s, and I just was like, get it together, man. Like, this is not, I just couldn't get on board with him. But also, the main character that we're following in this, I found her so bland. And what is also so funny to me about her is that everyone talks about like, she's so unpredictable, you can't control her. They're like, oh, she seems quiet, but she's really the most unique one. She's so different and unpredictable. And I just found her to be the most bland character. And I just was like, I'm not invested in either of them. And yet, I still had some amount of fun reading this just because I like her writing. Like, her books are just so readable that even the ones that like I don't care as much about the characters, I still have a fun time. But I'm going to put this, I'm really conflicted about, like, for right now, I think I'm going to put it in C tier maybe. We'll see if I need to move that later, but that's where it's gonna go. Then we have Jeweled Fire. And Jeweled Fire, this is the third book. This one was so much fun. In this one, we get to go to another country in this world. And it was fun to see like a different culture, a different court. All of the countries in this world are really interested in this idea of balance, and so they have their own concept of balance in this other country, and that was interesting. There's some like culture shock for the characters. There's a bit of like, it's not exactly a murder mystery, but it's like there are a bunch of characters kind of vying for a throne, and people are kind of mysteriously dying, and they're trying to figure out who's killing people. And I just really liked the main character. I think that she actually had a lot of personality, and I think that she also had some very interesting like inner conflict that made her just a deeper, more interesting person to follow. And I liked her romance in this one too. I remember this one was also one very restrained. It is kind of like a guard princess romance. I don't want to spoil things, but I feel like by the time you get to this book, it's pretty obvious what's going on. And also sort of like friends to lovers because they know each other. And I just really enjoyed the two of them, and the fact that this was another one that was very slow burn, a lot of restraint in that relationship. So this one, I think, I don't know if I should go with A or B. I'm gonna put it on A for now because I feel like that one was pretty great. I really loved that one. Then we have Unquiet Land, and I feel like this was maybe the most forgettable in the series. I thought it was fine. I didn't dislike it. There wasn't anything that I like hated. It's also maybe a little weird that it's the most forgettable because in this one they have emissaries from like a different country in this world, and they are very creepy and kind of disturbing. And so you would think that the book would have like ultimately made a larger impression on me, but it apparently really didn't. This one also, now that I'm thinking about it, I just remember that this one also had some things about it, like I don't know how to explain this without spoilers, but there is this kind of initiative that one of the characters wants to start, that like they think that they have a problem to solve. They think up a solution to it, but that solution is a terrible idea, and yet everyone around them is like, this is brilliant, this is genius. And it's like, this is essentially human trafficking that you're proposing, and you just are not getting it. So that was not great. Okay, so this one I feel like I'm gonna put on C tier, but is making me realize if that one is C tier because it's most forgettable, then that means that Royal Heirs needs to be on D tier because I disliked this one more. So that one is gonna move down. So we're gonna move this one over here. Okay, so this is where we're at. Next, we have Whispering Wood, the final book in the Elemental Blessing series. This is another one where I feel like the romance in this is pretty upfront and is one of the main things from the beginning. They don't necessarily have a lot of interaction time, but it's not her like subtle romance. And once again, I don't like the guy. I actually don't really like either of them. The main character in this one, she is so judgmental about everybody except that this one guy that she's having a romance with, and I'm like, you really should be judging him harder because he's not great. He deserves so much more judgment. And I don't understand really, like, I guess maybe very conceptually I understand why she likes him, but I didn't feel like they really had chemistry. In like practical ways, I don't understand why they like each other, why they would work together. And I just found him really unlikable. And also I'm like, this is a friends to lovers romance, which I love that trope. You would think I would be super on board for this one, and yet they managed to ruin it, and I didn't like this. So this one also going in D tier along with Royal Heirs. That one, not great. So far we've finished the Elemental Blessing series, and we've got kind of a range in this. We've got 2 up at the top with A, 1 at C, kind of forgettable, and then 2 that are D tier rows, like, not so great. Not the worst, because there is, with her books, there's always kind of a degree that I'm enjoying them just because I like her writing, I like this world, and I like the surrounding characters, because again, as you're following each person's romance, you're still getting cameos from characters from previous books, so you still get to see favorite characters. All right, then let's talk about Summers at Castle Auburn. So this is the one standalone. It's been a few years since I read it, so my memory's a little bit hazy. I did really enjoy this. I thought that as the character ages, she feels very much her age, which I think is a real skill, and I liked that. However, I do also think that the relationships could have used a little more depth. I think the themes in this could have used a little more depth, especially because in this one there was, the thing that bothered me in this was that it does have this kind of background plot line of these essentially like fairy people who are routinely captured and enslaved, and our main character is against it and she does want to stop it, so that's good. But I also feel like when you bring up such a serious topic, I feel like it needs maybe a little more depth or fleshing out to it. I just felt like it wasn't done justice in the story. I would have liked a little more depth. I think that my main feeling about this was like, it was, again, really readable, likable characters. It had a kind of cozy feel to it. It was fun, but it was lacking depth in a lot of areas. So I don't know where that leaves me. I guess for now, I'm gonna put this on C tier because I feel like it has some real like pluses and minuses, you know? It wasn't bad though. All right, so now we're getting into, what's it called? The 12 Houses series. This is the one I most recently read, and I'm just like, what is this called? So this one, first book, Mystic and Rider. This one was really fun. And I think it sets up the characters and this like core group of characters so well. I don't always love it when a book starts out with like an action sequence, and this one does, but I feel like the action sequence that it starts with is so good because it's not about the action. It is about establishing characters and what does this action tell you about each of these people, their personalities, their fight styles, their relationships to each other. It just sets up these characters so perfectly that you're like immediately invested. I'm like, I am all in immediately. So that was great. Has some lovable characters. And I do think that this world is really interesting. I really like the elements of both like the political unrest among the southern houses and how that kind of dovetails with this fanatical religious cult. This book, honestly, I was like, this has some themes that are maybe surprisingly relevant to our current timeline. And I just really enjoyed this. I feel like I'm so conflicted whether I should put this on A or B. I think I'm gonna put this on A tier for now. Like, I rated this a 4-star and the first book in Elemental Blessings a 5-star. But it was still such, like, it really started the series with a bang. It was still great. Okay, next book is, what is this one called? The 13th House. I had some conflicting feelings about because the romance in this is not one that I was particularly invested in because it involves cheating and the main character being in love with, like, having a romance with a married man. And I am just like, immediately, I cannot get on board with this. I also found him very arrogant and annoying and like, I don't know, I found him frustrating. The main character is going on and on about how like she's so drawn to him, he's so irresistible, and I was like, girl, he is very resistible, please. Like, I just don't get it, but you do you. Except that he's married, so don't do that. But I also, you know, I really liked that there's a lot that happens in the friendships and the character dynamics between the friends in this group, especially because our main character in this one is making some unwise decisions and her friends try to talk to her about it and talk her out of it. And I think that you got some real insight into their relationships to each other and their dynamics as each of them kind of approached her in a different way and what their reactions to this situation were. So I found that really interesting. And we got a lot of time with all of the characters, even the ones who weren't the main character of this book, and I just liked them so much. So I ended up having a good time even though I was not invested in the main romance. So this one I think is going to be our first B tier. All right, next is a novella, which is Shifter and Shadow, and this one actually just came out this year, but it takes place between books 2 and 3. And this one was so good. This follows a character who's one of like the main, 6 characters. He's a character who is very taciturn. He really doesn't talk a lot, and we mostly know things about him through the eyes of other characters. And I loved getting his perspective in this one because we don't get to hear him talk a lot in other books, and so getting to like really dig into his character and see what are his what are his thoughts like, you know? And I think he really is the epitome of like still waters run deep kind of character, because his thoughts are surprisingly romantic, and he has very like deep feelings about the person he's in love with, but just like the characters around him. And we get to just see him in a new light and get so much more insight into his character. I also just think this one was so well written as a novella. Like the scope of the plot and the scope of the emotions that were happening in this were just so well paced and so well done for the amount of pages that they had. It was so good. So this one definitely is an A tier for me. It was truly, I think, one of the best in the series. Merlin is scratching an itch, so we gotta take a break. Are you done? Okay, good boy. All right, next is Dark Moon Defender. And this one, I did not like. Oh, I don't know how to explain without doing spoilers. That is always the problem here. But oh my gosh. The main character that we're following in this one, obviously we've met in previous books, and he was never my favorite character of the bunch, but he was fine, you know? He was part of the group, he had his role, and like, you know, the other characters loved him, and that was great. Following his POV, oh my god, it made me dislike him. And I'm like, I don't think that's the direction you're supposed to go as you get more insight into these characters. You're supposed to like them less. I don't think so. And I really didn't like his dynamic with his love interest. I didn't like her as a character. Like, she had magic and yet somehow managed to be very useless and created bad situations in a way that, like, I specifically dislike characters that do this, where they are just like, no, I have to be stubborn. And then I create a situation where I almost die and everyone else has to try and save me, and so they almost die. And it's like, if you had just been like a basically logical person and or listened to the very reasonable advice of the people around you, even if you couldn't have your own logical, reasonable thoughts, none of this would have happened. But no, you have to be stupid and you have to be stubborn, because that's your one personality trait. Because this is the thing, is like, she's just such a basically incompetent person. And so even though she does have magic, she's so useless because she's so incompetent. And so then it feels like the author's like, well, she has to have some character trait, and they're like, well, she's stubborn. And they act like that makes her a strong character, and I'm like, no, it just makes her an idiot. And then the main character that we're actually following, I just disliked him so much. I really didn't like his relationship with her. Like, personally, it just felt too much like, you know, big muscle man protects tiny helpless woman. And I'm like, that's not really my vibe personally. But also, like, it's like the thing that he liked about her was that she was so useless. I don't know, it just feels like in the previous books, the female characters have been very competent people, and that is something that their love interests have really appreciated and valued about them. Whereas in this one, he was much more like, oh, well, I just want this very delicate looking woman who's so tiny so I can protect her. And it just, I don't know. I'm not against a character having a protective instinct and wanting to protect the people that they love, but there was just something about the way it was done that I was like, no thank you. Also because he, I feel like, was very manipulative and like didn't respect her boundaries, didn't respect her wishes. And then when she would get mad at him for not listening to what she said about how she wanted things to go or how she wanted to be treated, he would then get mad at her for being mad at him. And I hate that kind of thing. Oh my God, that drives me crazy when people do that. There were just so many things that I'm like, these are exactly the things that push my buttons and make me so mad. So this was not great. Now, once again, we do still get some cameos and stuff from other side characters that I really like, characters that we've met in previous books. And so that kind of saves it for me. So this one, you know, I think I still gave this like 3 stars because there were still parts of it that I liked. But this is probably the worst book by her that I have read, and it's going in F tier because I don't like them. Okay. Then we're going to Reader and Railings. This one, I think that I maybe set my expectations too high for this because it was following characters that I was particularly excited about, and then I just felt like it kind of fell flat. And I don't totally know if it was just my expectations or if it is something, you know, about the book itself, but I do feel like both of the kind of main characters that are love interests in this one were really fun, interesting, dynamic characters as side characters. And then when they became main characters, their personalities really got flattened out and they just felt much more generic. And I don't know, I just like wasn't that into it. I also feel like in this one, the romance just felt much more telling than showing. And that's not the case with so many of her other books. So I'm like, I know you know how to write a romance where you're showing how these characters love each other. And yet this one felt very much like the basis of the relationship was just the character telling us, like, well, it makes sense that we are in love because of these reasons and we have these things in common, and not as much like showing the process of them falling in love. And that's really what I wanted. But again, we got some good side characters in this one. So I don't know if I should put this one in C or D. Do I like it more than Royal Heirs and Whispering Wood? Yes, I think I do. So this is I'm gonna put it in C because I don't think it belongs with the ones that are on the D tier. And then finally, our last book, Fortune and Fate. And this one actually was following a new character who we had met previously, but is not one of the core 6. So that was kind of a twist to this. But yeah, I had fun with this. I think that the most interesting part of this was actually not the romance in it, but was the character's kind of internal journey. We're following a character who feels like she has failed at her mission and so is kind of trying to figure out what to do with her life, but feels like she cannot be trusted or depended on because she has like failed. And so we're following her as she's sort of rediscovering herself and maybe relearning to like trust herself. And of course there's also a romance. And this one I think was very fun. It was not one of the more notable ones in the series for me. I liked the romance in this. I don't necessarily feel like it was certainly like an opposites attract kind of romance, but one that I don't know if it fully sold to me why these opposites still like work together even if they are so different. But I also liked both of them, so I don't know. I think I'm going to put this on C tier. This is hard. No, maybe this one should go B. I think this one's gonna go B tier. Okay, we've gotten through all of them. Now I'm going to just look at this as a whole and be like, does this feel right? You know, I think that this is good. I think that this is good now. All right, so that is my official tier ranking of all of the Sharon Shinn books that I have read up until this point. I would love to know, have you read any Sharon Shinn? What were your favorites? Would you rank any of these differently? But please tell me about your opinions in the comments. But thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!